Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andrea Thomas. I'm the Chief Experience Officer here at the University of Utah, and I want to welcome you to our webinar. We are recording this webinar, so I want to make sure everybody knows that it is being recorded. It will be uploaded to our website. And so you will be able to go back and reference all of the information. I am really grateful and happy to welcome and introduce Taylor James Averett. He is our residency officer in the Department of Admissions, and he has a lot of really good information for you. Before he gets started, several people submitted questions that Taylor has, and he'll be answering a lot of those questions through his presentation. And then we also will have a Q&A time period after his presentation. So if you have any questions, you can go down and hit the Q&A button that's on the bottom of your screen, and you can type in your questions there. And then when he concludes the presentation, I will go into the Q&A and I will ask him the questions that you have submitted there. And we will be taking live questions. So as you think of things, you can type them in. And then as we're doing the Q&A, if you have questions, then you can type them in at that point. And so we'll get through all of the other questions that you might have. The focus of this webinar is on residency, and so you might have some other questions around residency that you can ask. If we don't have the right people on this webinar to answer the question that you have, then we'll take your information and make sure that we get that question answered for you. But we will do our best to answer all the questions that are asked. So I know Taylor it has his presentation going, so you won't actually see him in the window, but he's there and you will hear him. And then Megan helps us on the administration of the Q&A parts of things. And so you see her picture there, but she'll be off the screen as well. But I want to just thank you for being here, and I want to turn it over to Taylor.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrea. And I do want to apologize up front. I am on a loaner computer due to technical issues. I do have a camera and it is unfortunately not working. But the most important thing is not what I look like. The most important thing is the information we're going to be going over. That is the star of today's show. We're going to be talking about residency for tuition purposes, and we're going to be specifically talking about a policy that the vast majority of the students that we work with qualify for residency using this policy. We call it the one-year rule, and it applies to undergraduate students or incoming graduate students. These are graduate students who have not yet begun their classes in a graduate program. So they haven't officially begun as graduate students yet. For residency, the first thing that we like to talk about is how residency is regulated very specifically in the state of Utah and for all Utah schools of higher education. Utah state law, which comes from the Utah State Legislature, 53B-8-102, gives the legal definition of resident student status. Who can be a resident for tuition purposes as a student in the state of Utah? There's an organization that coordinates and manages this law, as well as all higher education institutions in the state of Utah. It's called the Utah System of Higher Education. They have a document called the Board of Regents R512 Policies and Procedures. And this gives further definitions about terms, about legal parameters and provisions. It's a valuable document that further expounds Utah state law to give very good explanations about this very topic, about resident student status for students. Furthermore, the last document is University of Utah's own institutional policy. USHE and the state of Utah have said that as long as a school of higher education here in the state of Utah As long as they maintain the basic foundations of the laws and the rules that are set forth, they're allowed to set their own policies that are stricter than the basic foundations of the law. And therefore, the University of Utah has its own institutional policy. All of this information links to the Utah state law, the U-Sheet R512 document, as well as the University of Utah's own institutional policy. Links to that can be found on our website, which appears there below. Residency reclassification. We call it reclassification for a student who is currently, according to Utah law, a resident for tuition purposes of any other state or U.S. territory, and they want to reclassify and become a resident under Utah state law. That process is called reclassification. Students need to select and then and apply under the specific policy or exception based on their specific situation. Some of these other situations that we will not be going over in this presentation, but they include things like graduate students who have already begun their graduate programs, active military veterans and or their immediate family members, American Indians whose lands partly, wholly are within the borders of the state of Utah or contiguous with the borders of the state of Utah, ecclesiastical service volunteers, Olympic athletes. These are all types of other policies and other exceptions that a student might find themselves under. As we're going through this presentation, if you believe that your student's situation is slightly different and maybe it falls under one of these situations that I talked about, that is possible. And I would invite you to go to our website and investigate that. We're not going to be talking about the specific details of all of those exceptions or different policies, but I just want to make you aware that there are multiple routes to gain residency. There's a lot of exceptions and policies out there, so please be aware of what your situation and your student situation may be. Also, the last one there, House Bills 118 and 144, these are not reclassifications to become a resident of the state of Utah. These are what are known as tuition waivers. These specifically only apply to certain Utah high school graduates, specifically students who have completed a minimum of 3 academic years in a Utah high school and have graduated from a Utah high school, but otherwise may not be qualified for residency, specifically based on U.S. customs and immigration law. However, if they don't qualify under USCIS immigration status laws, but they have completed 3 academic years in a Utah high school and graduated from Utah high school, they may be eligible for a tuition waiver. We won't be going into great detail about that, but that is also another situation that some students find themselves under. For all policies, all exceptions, every single one of these things we've talked about, the student must meet all of the requirements for the exception of the policy that they choose. It's not an and/or situation. It's when we set forth the criteria, they must meet every single one of the criteria in order to be approved. They need to go and submit a reclassification or exception or other type of application by the priority deadlines. We're going to be discussing those. All of this, again, is on our website. Now, having said all that, most students reclassify under the 1-year rule that we talked about, and this is what we are going to be focusing on primarily today. The 1-year rule is broken up into 4 main categories. They must qualify under United States Customs and Immigration Services criteria. We're going to talk more about that. They must establish Utah domiciliary ties. Those are essentially official documents and identification that ties the student to the state of Utah. We're going to be talking more about that. They must be able to demonstrate their tax independence. We're going to talk about that. And they must also provide proof of physical presence being in the state of Utah for a minimum of 12 months. We're going to talk more about that as well. Now, priority deadlines. Let's go over this real quickly. What we mean by priority deadlines is we want a student to submit the application and all of the documentation that they have up until that point by the priority deadline for the term they're trying to apply for. The different terms that we have are fall semester, spring semester, and summer semester. Priority deadlines for each one of those semesters is July 1st for fall semester, November 1st for spring semester, and April 1st for summer semester. The student needs to submit their application and all the documents they may have up till that point by the priority deadline. And what that means is we will then prioritize those applications and we guarantee an answer before the tuition deadline for the semester that they're applying for. So they will know if they were approved or denied before tuition is due. All the applications that we receive before the priority deadlines are considered on time. Applications that we receive after the priority deadline are considered late, and they do not get the same guarantee of the student knowing if they were approved for residency before tuition is due. They might find out after tuition is due. So we encourage everyone to apply on time so that they can have that guaranteed knowledge of knowing what their tuition rate is going to be before they have to pay tuition. We will talk more about the questions related to this and any other details you'd like to know, because I know this is a very important point to discuss. Okay, first, United States Customs and Immigration Services requirements. Students for residency in the state of Utah, this applies for every single policy out there. Students must hold either U.S. citizenship, granted permanent residency with a green card, granted asylum or refugee status, special immigrant visa. This is specifically special immigrant visa. I had to research this myself. It applies only to people from Iraq and Afghanistan who helped the U.S. military in some kind of capacity while the U.S. military was engaged in those two regions. So it's a small group of people. Humanitarian parolees, temporary protection status, or good faith evidence of a submitted application for one of these that I talked about above. What we mean by good faith evidence is we do still require documentation, but if they have an application that they've submitted to USCIS to achieve one of these statuses, we can accept a submitted application, proof that it's in process as well, and they can become a resident for tuition purposes. And as I said too, if students are on a different type of visa, or if the student is undocumented in the United States, they may qualify for one of those tuition waivers that we mentioned if they have completed 3 academic years in a Utah high school and graduated from Utah high school. Domiciliary ties. So what we were talking about before, domiciliary ties are official state of Utah documents and identification that officially ties the student to the state of Utah. These are required. Upon establishing these domiciliary ties, they must relinquish their domiciliary ties in any other U.S. state or territory. That is required by law. They must establish the 3 following below. A Utah driver's license, a Utah voter registration. The third one is only if applicable, Utah vehicle registration. What we mean by if applicable is if the student owns a vehicle, their name is on a vehicle, then they must register that vehicle in the state of Utah, and we have to have a copy of that. If the student is operating a vehicle that does not have their name on it, it is in the name of someone else, all we ask for is a copy of the registration of the state that it's registered in. And if the student is using no vehicle whatsoever, they come to school completely by bus or by bike or by train, then we won't require that. So we do require Utah vehicle registration if the student owns or has their name on a vehicle. Now, the domiciliary tie deadlines, you notice this at the bottom. These are different than the priority deadlines, and I need you all to take note of that. We need the domiciliary ties that we talked about, the 3 domiciliary ties, to be established and active on or before the dates below. We do not need them to be submitted to us by these dates. But when they are submitted to us, and those are the priority deadlines. The priority deadline is for submission. When they are submitted to us, we need to see that these domiciliary ties were established by the dates below. For fall semester every year, it's May 1st. For spring semester every year, it's October 1st, and for summer semester every year, it's February 1st. Tax independence is required. It's required that a student either be demonstrated to be independent and not claimed by another tax filer by some means of tax documentation. Students that are non-married and younger than 24 years old must submit one of the following: either their own independently filed federal tax return, a 1040 form, showing that they were not claimed as a dependent, or they can submit their parents or guardians 1040 form, and it shows that they are not listed as a tax dependent on their parent or guardian's taxes. For all taxes, it must be the most recently filed tax returns. Right now it's November, it's about to be December tomorrow. Most of the students we're working with right now are submitting for spring 2024 semester. At this point in late November 2023, the most recent taxes would still be 2022's taxes. Even though they're submitting for residency change for spring of 2024, the most recent tax year is still 2022 at this point. So take note of that. If the student is applying for a fall semester, let's say fall 2024, the most recent taxes at that point would have been the 2023 taxes. They must be submitted tax returns and not unfiled tax forms. The way we verify this is usually with a signature on the second page of the 1040. If it's an e-signature and we have confirmation of e-signature with some kind of code, we also accept that. If it's submitted to us directly from a CPA and the CPA signs it on their letterhead, but some kind of verification that the taxes have been filed, they are on file with the IRS, and it's not like a screenshot of, when someone's in the midway of preparing their taxes with H&R Block online, and then they just send us a screenshot. We can't accept something like that. Again, students that are 24 years old or older are above this limit, and they are automatically considered tax independent. This also applies to students who are married. So any student who is married, or any students who are 24 years old or older, we do not require tax documentation. It is automatically assumed they are already independent on their taxes. Proof of physical presence. This is the biggest one, the most document heavy one. Proof, it's essentially proof of a document trail proving the student's presence in the state of Utah for a period of 12 months. Prior to the first day of classes for the term that the student seeks to attend as a resident student, the student must maintain continuous Utah residency for 1 full year. During that 1 full year, they cannot leave Utah for more than 29 days or have more than 29 days unaccounted for, a total of those two during the 12 months. What this means is they can't have more than 29 days out of state or unaccounted for total in a 12-month period. The way the student demonstrates this is, the most common way is we can look up their transcripts, or they can submit, if it's from another Utah school, they can submit their transcripts, or we can look up their transcripts from the University of Utah and see that they've been attending a full semester at the University of Utah. Of course, this is for on-campus enrollment. So if the student is taking only online classes, obviously, if they have Wi-Fi, they can be taking those classes on a beach somewhere with no cares in the world, not freezing here in Utah. We can't prove that they were in Utah. However, if we see that the classes were on campus, then we can use those as proof that they were in the state of Utah. From the time period that the semester starts all the way until the very last day of finals, we would accept that entire time period. Other documents that we accept: pay stubs from an employer, if they get a letter from their employer or human resources saying that they worked from this time to this time; bank or credit card statements that are in the student's name, showing that they made purchases in Utah. When it says every 6 days or fewer, you need to keep in mind this is the gap. There must be a gap of every 6 days or fewer. We're really counting once a week, or we're counting 7 days. Let's imagine that they made a purchase on Wednesday. They need to make another purchase the following Wednesday and keep making purchases at least every Wednesday or sooner in order for this to apply. If they make a purchase on a Wednesday and then the following week they made another purchase on a Friday, unfortunately, we would only be able to count the Wednesday before and then the Friday after and all of the time in between those two purchases would count against them. So it's very, very important that we show purchases made once a week, at least every 7 days or less, if that makes sense. Physical presence check-ins at our office, also once a week, every 7 days or less. They can come to our office, say, I'm here, they present their ID, we fill out a quick form, it takes less than a minute, it's very quick and easy. Other types of official documents that have their names, that have their exact dates of the events that happen and the exact location of where the events happen are also acceptable. Common things that we use are things like gym punch-in records. They join a gym, they have a little fob keychain hold on their keychain, they clock in, and at the end of the year that they've been living here, they can go up to the front desk of that gym and say, can I get a printout of all of my records of when I came to this gym? And as long as we see that they went to the gym at least once a week or less, we can count that towards them. Meal plan punches. If they live here on campus and they have a meal plan, we can accept records like that. Flight tickets, as long as we had proof that they were in Salt Lake City International Airport, that proves 1 day. So things like that. Also important to note, anything that the University of Utah sponsors, University of Utah specific programs such as athletics, study abroad programs, institutional programs, internships that the university is sending them to, all of those can be counted towards physical presence within the state of Utah with institution verification from the University of Utah. It doesn't matter if they go to Shanghai or Tokyo or San Francisco or wherever, as long as the University of Utah is sending them on a program, it still counts as being in the state of Utah, as long as we have that documentation from University of Utah staff. One quick thing we're going to talk about is there are many scholarships out there, and many scholarships may or may not be impacted by the student's residency status. We need to encourage you that any types of scholarships or forms of financial aid need to be discussed with the University Office of Scholarships and Financial Aid for specific details about how they may or may not be affected. We do not have that information with residency. You need to go to the Office of Scholarships and Financial Aid to get that. One important thing that we must highlight, however, is there are 3 scholarships that are listed below. Any time spent in Utah on the following 3, you cannot use that time when you're accepting money from these scholarships towards reclassifying to become a Utah resident. The biggest one that we work with is the Western Undergraduate Exchange, or WUI. If a student is using WUI during the 12-month period, and then after that 12-month period wants to become a resident of the state of Utah, they are forbidden from doing so. The Western Undergraduate Exchange is a compact agreement between governors of different Western states. And as part of that, the bylaws say that if they are using funds from this program, they will, in that entire time they're using funds, be considered a resident of their home state, no matter where they came from, whether it's Montana or Colorado or California. That they are not allowed to establish residency in any other state that they go to school in. So what this means is if they want to become a resident at some point, but they have been using WUI, they must spend a minimum of 12 months or more off of a scholarship program like this. And then only after that point would they be able to reclassify and become a Utah resident. Usually the way we put it is students need to either choose something like WUI or they need to choose residency. It really is complicated to try to get both because there are very significant bylaws and rules regarding that. Let's go over a basic timeline of the 1-year rule. Student arrives in Utah before the first day of classes. They begin establishing their physical presence document trail. So they get their transcripts from they're going to school here. They get a part-time job and they start collecting their pay stubs. They start getting gym records, join a gym and make sure that they go once a week, or they come to our office once a week, something like that. Establish domiciliary ties prior to the domiciliary tie deadline. Again, those are those deadlines where they need to have their driver's license, their voter registration, vehicle registration before a certain date, but they don't necessarily need to send us those documents by that date. We just need to see that they were established by that date. The student needs to either file their own tax return as an independent, or they can ensure that they aren't claimed on someone else's taxes by sending us parent or guardian's taxes, one of those two. You need to submit a reclassification application and all the necessary documentation by the priority deadline. Again, those priority deadlines are applications are considered on time if we get them by the priority deadline. Applications after the priority deadline are considered late and will not be given the same priority processing by our team as applications we get by the priority deadline. If all the applications and items are submitted by the priority deadline, again, a decision will be given before tuition deadline. The student will know whether or not they are approved or denied before tuition is due. There are other policies and other exceptions. We talked about some of those: American Indians, people that are involved with the military, Olympic athletes that are required to train in the state of Utah. There's other types of reclassification policies that may apply to a student. If a student gets married to a Utah resident, they can apply to be a resident based on their spouse's residency information in the state of Utah. If a child has been living out of state, however, one or more of their parents are living in the state of Utah, they can apply to become a resident based on their parents or guardians' residency information and status in the state of Utah. If the student or their immediate family members are required to move to the state of Utah for full-time employment, there's a policy for that. If they have been a Utah resident, however, they left for a temporary period of time for various reasons, they can also become a resident again as long as there's proper documentation. Again, with every single policy and every single exception, they must meet all of the required criteria for anything that they choose. Please find out more on our website. Our website is extremely detailed. We're really trying to keep it up to date, and actually we're in a major overhaul to make it easier to use right now. So use our website. We love our website. It's great information. If you want to contact us, please send us an email, residency@utah.edu. You can call us at the number there, option 5, or you can come visit us in person at the address below. That concludes my presentation. I am ready for a Q&A session.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Taylor. We have several questions. So and some of them will repeat things you say, just want to reiterate a couple of important things. So one component of the application is student filing his or her own taxes. If there were some tax-related events before the student started at the university, how do you manage that? Do they have to start being independent the tax year before they start school or the tax year after they start school?
So I want to highlight this second bullet point must be the most recently filed federal tax return. Most students apply for fall semesters. Let's use the example of fall of 2024 as an example. The most recent tax year, by the time we get to fall of 2024, will have been tax year for 2023. We would need tax forms in the form of a 1040, either from the student themselves or from their parent or guardians, that clearly demonstrate they are not a dependent, i.e. they are an independent on that tax form. I hope that answered the question. Essentially, what we require is the most recent tax year. If by fall of 2024, your student wants to apply, the most recent tax year will be 2023.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And there's a lot of very specific things that your accountant can probably help with. So, providing this information and looking and the email that you sent about residency, if there's specific questions, you can go to that. Several questions about students in different sorts of University of Utah events, activities. So I'm a student at the Utah Asia campus. I'm in the band. I'm an athlete. So all of those things. What exact documentation do they need from the program for the travel time? And does one thing count for everything, or do they need a letter from the program for kind of every time the band traveled, or every time they were an athlete they traveled?
it's a very case by case situation with a lot of these things. And we are very receptive, and we try to answer quickly. I know we get very delayed, especially during our busy season, which is May to September. However, we definitely want to answer your questions, and we realize it is a case by case basis. One thing I can say, Utah Asia Campus is relatively easy. We have access to the transcripts, and it indicates on the transcripts that they have been enrolled in Utah Asia Campus in Korea. And we can use the time. Now, their registration or registrar's calendar is different than the one here at the Salt Lake City campus. But we can use the time from the beginning of the semester to the very last day of finals as proof they are in the state of Utah, even though they are in South Korea. If you are attending the Utah Asia campus and you have proof that you finished the semester there, that time counts as being in the state of Utah because you are a student of the University of Utah. We also allow for a week buffer before and after each semester for Utah Asia campus. If they're coming from like a place like North America and going to Utah Asia campus, we allow a buffer time for travel, a week before and a week after. The same goes for other types of travel, especially like if an internship is for like a 6-week program or a 2-month program or something. That we would allow for a buffer time a week before and a week after. For sports events, usually we get like a coach's letter. They had to leave on a bus and go to Las Vegas or San Diego or something. We don't, because that's so close and it's not requiring international travel to Korea or Italy or something. There's not the exact same leeway that we get for travel times and whatnot. As I said, it's a very case by case basis. It really highly depends on the band and where they're going. It depends on sports teams and where they're going. It depends on if you're on an internship, if you're on a study abroad program. It's very, very detail specific to the situation. So I would encourage everyone to communicate with us. We will communicate back. We will work with you no matter what your situation is. I do want to emphasize, if it is the University of Utah, no matter where you are, it counts as being in Utah. Whether you're in South Korea at Utah Asia campus, whether you're on a study abroad program in Amsterdam, whether you're on an internship studying robotics in Tokyo, it's fine. You're in Utah as long as the University of Utah says that you're a student and you're there for the University of Utah. So hopefully that answered the question.
Okay, great. Thank you. Several questions on how students demonstrate that they're in a place. So first question is, during the academic year, so fall semester, spring semester, summer semester, do breaks in those semesters need confirmation that they're there, or are they part of the semester so they're assumed they're covered by the registration?
So really good question. Thank you for that question. We do not need duplicate records for any given time period. That's going to overcomplicate our work. We're trying to keep this as simple as possible. It's already a complicated process. If we have a transcript and the transcript shows that the student was on campus and the transcript shows that it was completed, meaning that the student didn't withdraw halfway through the semester at some point. If we have a transcript, we use just that transcript and we say, when did the semester start? And when was the last day of finals? And we give that entire time period from day 1 to the last day of finals as proof the student was in the state of Utah. And now, times between semesters, commonly like winter break, which is going to start here after December 15th until January, it's like the first week of January.
The 8th is when school starts. January 8th is when the semester starts.
Okay, so between December 15th to January 8th, we would need additional records. That's not like an in-semester break, that's between semesters. So if we don't have a transcript for any given time period, we need other types of records. If you are in school and you are attending school on campus, and you don't withdraw from the semester halfway through, we will use that transcript from the first day of the semester to the last day of finals, and that entire time period will be covered as proof that you're in the state of Utah. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, one other question on that. Do students need to be full-time students? So for example, summer semester, I
Mm,
know I need to stay in the state of Utah. Can I just take one class or do I
no,
have to be a full-time student?
no. We do not see how many credit hours you're taking. All my team looks at is it on campus or is it online? We also, to be quite frank, going back to the previous question, if some of the classes take place out of the state of Utah, we've seen study abroad programs where students went to, I saw a lot of students actually this past summer that went to Paris, Amsterdam, and then Rome. So France, the Netherlands, and then Italy. However, we knew that we saw the transcript and we saw proof on the transcript that it was a University of Utah program. And that counted as being in the state of Utah, even though they were in Europe. So we do look very deeply into the transcripts and look at whether it was online or in person. If it's in person, it counts towards you. We do not look at how many credit hours. If it was one class, if it was even a one credit class, as long as you complete the semester, it's proof that you were in the state of Utah. It doesn't matter how many credit hours, just that you were here and we
Yeah.
have that it was completed.
Okay, but it has to be an in-person class, not an online class.
Exactly. Online classes have very specific codes on a transcript. We can see very clearly if they're online. We've had students that all of their classes were online. And like I said before, if you have Wi-Fi, you could be taking those classes on the moon if there's a lunar base in the future and it has Wi-Fi to Earth, who knows? It doesn't prove you're in Utah, unfortunately.
Right.
You can see that on transcripts very clearly.
Okay, you mentioned credit card swipes. Do meal plan swipes or gym going to the student life center, do those swipes count or do they
Yeah.
have to actually purchase something?
No, those swipes would count. If and that, like I said before, we don't need duplicate records. If you've been going to the gym once a week and all you want to submit is your gym records, great. You don't need to submit your bank records. In fact, gym records are easier to use for us and they're easier to translate than bank records a lot of times. Bank records can be really difficult and it takes a lot of time to try to comb through that. Not that I'm saying don't submit bank records. If that's the only record you have, please submit that. But yes, gym records, if you went to the gym, let's say you went to the gym every single Wednesday, you swiped every single Wednesday for 52 weeks out of the year. If you submitted a record showing you went to the gym for 52 weeks out of a 12-month period, that would all count. And if it's a gym here in the state of Utah, that would count 100%. Meal plans, same thing. If you had a meal at least once a day, and you submit the record of every single swipe for the meal plan, that would prove your presence in the state of Utah. We wouldn't need an additional record on top of that, like a bank purchase record or something.
Okay, thank you. Is there a place that students or parents can look to see how many days they've been reported out of state? Or is it basically no, you're actually demonstrating when they are in the state, so you have to look at your own records to see when they're not in the state?
That is an amazing question. It's actually something that we're actively trying to improve right now. Um, as of right now, the process is there's no place to see that information, unfortunately, except for the communications that we send out to the student and or their families. So we do an active evaluation process, and usually the evaluation process can take up to a few weeks in some cases, and there are several emails that go back and forth. So on the emails, there will always be a record of there are X number of days that are still showing either unaccounted for or proven out of the state of Utah. The days that we show missing, and the evaluator that's working on the student's reclassification application will list. They're missing, for example, between December 15th to January 8th. They're missing between May 5th to June 12th. They're missing between June 20th to July 15th, something like that. There will be a list of all the days that are missing. However, we're trying very desperately to create something that's more infographic and more visually representative. So we're trying really hard. So
Okay,
13,
awesome.
hopefully we get something better, but we will communicate with you. It's not going to be a shot in the dark. It will be on emails at the very least.
Okay. And I feel like it's an important point to reiterate. Summer semester, all students get in-state tuition.
Right?
So it's a really good value for you when you're looking at proving your residency to go ahead and take classes during the summer if they're available to help you, because you do pay like you are an in-state resident
Yes.
during the summer semester.
Every single student, if they are documented, undocumented, no matter what visa they're on, if they're on a green card, if they are from Florida, from California, it doesn't matter. If you are a student at the University of Utah and you're enrolled in a summer semester, you pay exactly the same amount as everyone else.
Yeah, so it's just a really good value. Is there any benefit to applying before the application deadline, like getting it done months before, or does it just need to be done by that deadline?
Potentially. The the most common semester is fall, so I'm going to use fall as the example. Let's use fall of 2024. The application, I don't even know the exact date off the top of my head. I believe the exact date is January 15th. The application for fall of 2024 will open and will be available to the public as of January 15th. It will then close on the tuition deadline for fall of 2024, which is September. It's a certain date in September. I don't remember off the top of my head. But essentially, the application will be open from some point in January until early September. And they can apply at any point in that time. All applications that we receive by or before the priority deadline, we will prioritize, which is July 1st. Applications we receive between July 2nd and that date tuition deadline in September are considered late and will not be given the same guarantee of knowing before tuition deadline of whether or not they get approved. If you apply earlier than July 1st, there is a certain advantage because it gives more time for members of my team to communicate with the student and their families about any potential gaps in the information. So yeah, I would think the only, well, I don't know about the only, but I would think a very big benefit to that would be it extends the amount of time we can communicate and work together as a team.
Okay, great. Several questions on how to show voter registration proof and driver's license proof. Is a photocopy okay? How do you know you have voter registration? And is there anything else besides voter registration that can be replaced? You have to wait for the card to come in the mail, and then it's kind of hard for students to get mail. So any advice on those?
For sure. Yeah, well, let's cover the easy one first. Driver's license, take a picture of the driver's license on our website too. Just so you are aware, please go to our website. I'm always plugging our website. Second thing, on our website, when you get to the section where you can submit additional documentation, it's a section called post submission form, which is different than the application. With the application, you can submit all these documents. You can attach it to the application. But if you've already submitted the application and you still need to submit more documentation, there's a thing called post-submission form. Now, at the very top of that page, it explains what formats are available and easily accessible because of IT issues. So please use those formats. Things like JPEG is available, PDF is available. You can even copy and paste things into a Microsoft Word document and submit the Word document. That's available. Most people have iPhones nowadays, and iPhone, the file format is unfortunately .ehic, I believe. We get submissions of .ehic all the time, and we never see them because our system doesn't accept it. So please submit the documents in the right format. PDF is a very common one, and many people submit PDFs, and it's very easy. Take a picture, make sure it's a PDF format, send us your driver's license. As far as voter registration, if you get the card, you can do the same thing. Take a picture, send us the card. If you don't have the card yet, you can go to the voter commission or what's it called? The voting commission office, I believe. And it's down on 2100 South and State Street. It's real close to here. You can go into the office and ask for a copy and they'll give you a paper copy. You can go to vote.utah.gov. Every single registered voter in the state of Utah can go to this website and they can pull up their own voter registration information as well. So there are multiple ways to get your voter registration information. Um, Sometimes we get a lot of ballots, pictures of a ballot that they are submitting. Unfortunately, we can't prove that they're a registered voter, unfortunately, so don't do that. But there are many, many other ways. Commonly, people will go to the voting commission office and ask for a letter from the county commissioner, and the county commissioner gives a generic letter saying, X person registered to vote on this day. They are a registered voter. It's very simple.
Okay. And if somebody is not eligible to vote, for example, they're not 18 yet,
Mm.
then what do they do about the voter registration?
Great question. If for whatever reason, because there are sometimes reasons, like, well, another reason, if they are on a green card, no one on a green card can vote. All we do is ask for, we have a list of, that I didn't share, but if that case came about, we would communicate with the student. We have a list of additional alternate domiciliary ties that we can also accept. If the student is, let's say, 17 years old or younger, they can't vote. All we would ask is we would send them a list of saying, okay, we understand you can't register to vote. Please send us one of the following on a list of like alternate domiciliary ties. So, and it's quite extensive. There's quite a few things that we can accept as alternates. If they're 18 and a US citizen, we do require that they be a registered voter. But if they're 17 or younger, or they're not a US citizen, or they fall under any number of, exceptional circumstances, then we will make accommodations.
Okay. Couple questions on if there's any kind of academic standing that affects anything like academic probation. Th does that affect their ability to demonstrate residency?
No, we would never look at anything like that.
Okay. And then a couple questions about, hold on. We got bank records. So, oh, okay, health. So it doesn't matter where they have health insurance, correct? They can still have health insurance from their parents out of state. What
Yeah.
if they need a health procedure like a surgery or something? Are there any exemptions for needing to be away for health reasons?
Okay, two good questions. First and foremost, you never look into health insurance information. You'd never need to submit that. That's not a concern. So don't worry about that. Now, if they have to leave the state for health circumstances, um, it is an unfortunate circumstance. However, there's a policy called extenuating circumstance. Now, the extenuating circumstance policy does not apply for anyone leaving the state of Utah. The extenuating circumstance policy is for people that are required because of health reasons, because of divorce reasons, because of health of an immediate family member, and the student needs to be a full-time caregiver for that person. If they are required to move to Utah for extenuating circumstances, there is an exception for that. If the student is required to leave the state of Utah while they're trying to become a resident of the state of Utah, legally, the state of Utah does not have a provision for that, unfortunately. So it is something that the student needs to be aware of, unfortunately, a year in advance, and make plans accordingly. We understand that there are unfortunate circumstances that happen sometimes. We understand that health insurance can be a major headache. But yes, if the student has to leave the state of Utah, but they're also trying to prove that they've been here for 12 months, the law says they are only allowed to be out of the state of Utah or have unaccounted for days, a maximum of 29, unfortunately.
29. And I think it's important to reiterate, these are state legislation, so state laws. So Taylor, you don't determine this, and nor can you influence exceptions. That's done through the legislature.
I would have to go before the state legislature and plead my case as a normal citizen. I do not have any authority to change the law, unfortunately. You are completely correct, Andrea. It is mandated by the Utah State Legislature.
Yeah, perfect. If students are using their parent's car that's registered to a parent, does that count against them in any way?
No,
Or do,
no. If their name is not on a car, but they're operating a car that is under someone else's name, all we would do is say, let's say it's from Colorado, okay? We'd say, oh, okay, can you send a copy of your dad's car registration from Colorado? Because you said you're operating a car in the state of Utah that's registered in Colorado to your dad. And we would just ask for a copy of that. We require that it be registered in the state of Utah if the student's name is on the vehicle. So, for example, if their name is on the title, or if they have a lien holder with a bank or a credit union or whatnot, but they also are on that lien. If their name is attached to a vehicle, then it's required that it be registered in the state of Utah. And we have a copy of that. If they're operating another vehicle that does not have their name on it, we would just ask for a copy of the out-of-state registration. And then if they're not operating any vehicle whatsoever and they're taking the bus everywhere, then we won't require any kind of vehicle registration whatsoever.
okay. Does a housing agreement for example, if I'm staying in Utah over the summer, but I'm not attending school, but I have a housing agreement that I'm going to be in Utah over the summer, does that qualify? Or do I still have to show the meal swipes, the gym swipes, or the credit card swipes?
Yes, you have to show the meal swipes, credit card swipes, gym swipe. You cannot, for proof of physical presence purposes, you cannot submit housing agreements, a lease agreement, a rental contract. The proof of physical presence, what it requires is three things. Every document has to have the student's name. Every document has to have exact dates, and every document has to have exact uh, location of event. Having an agreement or a contract is not proof of an event that happened. It's in no way proof that you were actually living there, unfortunately. Unfortunately, in years past, the state of Utah had found, and I don't know if there was a change to the law of this or if they just found it, but there were families or students that were taking out 12-month leases, but they weren't actually living in Utah. They just had a contract with their name on it. So the state of Utah has decided we need documents that prove that an event happened and it happened on a specific date. Unfortunately, rental agreements, housing contracts, whatnot, they are not proof of any event happening physically in the state of Utah.
Okay. Lots of questions about documentation on the tax forms. Do you only need the first 2 pages of the 1040 form,
Yeah.
or do you have, so just the first 2 pages
Just 2
of
pages.
the 1040 form?
What we look
Okay,
for, yes, what we look for on a 1040, we look for who is the tax filer. If it's the student, great. If it's the parents, great. We look for if it's the student and they say that they're filing independent as a single tax filer. We go down a couple of lines and it asks the question, can you be claimed by someone else as a tax dependent? And as long as they do not mark that, they don't mark yes, then we can say, okay, they're filing independent and they are not claimed as a dependent. Then we go to the second page and we see that it's been signed or it's been e-signed or it's been submitted by the tax filer's CPA accountant, something like that, as proof that it's submitted to the IRS. That's the only information we're looking for. If it's mom and dad's taxes, we have to obviously confirm that it's mom and dad. And we look
right.
down the list of dependents. As long as the student's name is not listed as a dependent, it's also considered proof that they are independent. And then we go to the second page again, and we see proof of submission.
Okay. Does it ever make sense to do a live physical check-in at the residency office? And then are there any times that the residency office wouldn't be open for a physical check-in?
Good question. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think if it's convenient for you to come to the office, it's super easy. My personal opinion, I think it's a lot easier than having to remember to go to the grocery store and make a purchase once a week. Especially because it's so quick and easy. You come to our office, there's always an attendant at the window. They take your identification, they go to the computer, they fill out information on what's called an office check-in form. Usually it takes less than 2 minutes. Sometimes it takes less than a minute. It's a very quick process. And it's 100% guaranteed. We saw you, we took a picture, or we looked at your driver's license or whatever photo identification you have, and we check it off and we keep a record of that. It's very quick and easy. As far as accessibility, I like to say to students and parents that we follow the same hours as banks. We are open Monday through Friday. We are open 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday. We are closed on Saturdays. We are closed on Sundays, and we are closed on federal holidays. So 4th of July, we are closed. Thanksgiving Day and the day after, Friday after Thanksgiving, we are closed. We're closed on Christmas. We're closed on New Year's, Memorial Day. We're closed on those days. But every other day, Monday through Friday, we're open just like a bank, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Show up, bring your identification, quick and easy.
Okay, awesome. Back to taxes. Do both parents need to show their tax returns if they file separately, or only the primary caregiver? And if they typically file tax extensions, does that impact the timing of when you would consider that information?
Very good questions. If the parents are separated and they file separate taxes, we would need both parents. We need to confirm on every parent or legal guardian, the student is not a dependent. So in those situations, yes, we will ask for both parents or both guardians' tax forms. With the second question about extensions, we understand, things are complicated. However, it is required that we have some form of documentation for the most recent tax year. If the taxes have been extended, in those cases, we usually ask the family to work with their CPA and have the CPA draft a letter confirming on the CPA's letterhead that the student is not or has not been a dependent for the most recent tax year. In some cases, we've gone back to the families because the student was a tax dependent on the most recent tax year, or the taxes are being extended and they don't know yet. And we've asked the family to work with their CPA to amend the taxes. And then we have some kind of confirmation that the taxes have been amended. It is a very strict rule. We understand that. There's not a lot of budge or leeway with extensions, but we do require documentation that the student was a tax independent for the most recent tax year, depending obviously on the term the student's applying for. Again, the most common example is fall of 2024. The most recent tax year will be 2023.
Okay. If a student doesn't have their own bank account, but is an authorized user on their parent's bank account, but has their own number for their debit card, does that work okay for the bank statement or the credit card statement?
I think in most cases, yes, as long as I like to call it lock and key, as long as we can find the key and match it with the lock, as long as all the documentation is there and we can put the puzzle pieces together, it's fine. As I said before, all proof of physical presence documents have to have the student's name, proof of dates, exact dates, and exact locations. If we have their name on the record and we show that they were making purchases in the state of Utah, we can use that. I will advise, however, it can become extremely complicated because sometimes we get records where we have mom and dad who live in, let's say, San Diego, and they're making purchases on the bank account. But then we show all these purchases on the exact same day in Utah. And it can become really, really, really complicated. And we're only human and we are flawed. It's probably easiest to have the student have their own account by themselves. That's definitely going to eliminate more human errors from my team, or other forms of records like coming into our office once a week. Now, we'll take your bank records, we'll look through them. If the student or the family objects and say, but wait a minute, look at this. Like, we can have those conversations, we can talk about it. Like I said, sometimes bank records, especially bank records where there's multiple users on the same account, it can be really complicated. So we will accept it. It does complicate things, but yeah, we'll work with it as long as we see the student's name.
Okay,
That
can
was
you
a
go
really convoluted answer. I apologize.
No, it's awesome. Can you go over really quick for students who start school and move in the middle of August, right? So usually housing opens up the middle of August. Let's say they moved in the middle of August of 2023. Um, the, talk about when they can apply for residency and when they need to show the documentation. So I'm assuming it's the full year from the middle of August to the middle of August, less 29 days. And whenever you apply, you still have to show the documentation for the full year through when they moved in.
Correct.
Okay.
I think you answered that, Andrea.
Okay, well, I got a lot of questions on it and I just wanted to be super clear and then I wanted to say, yes, that's right.
Yes, yes.
Okay, now if I start the middle of August, but I did something like I am at a dance residency or I'm at an event of some sort that actually started in June, could that start my residency timeline?
Yeah.
Even though school doesn't start, I just have to document and include the 29 days and it'll be from the first, let's say it's the 1st of July, from the 1st of July through the 30th of June. Does that work okay?
Yes. So I want to highlight here, let's go back to this slide. I hope it's still on the screen. This comes directly from USHI's R512 documentation. This is a direct quote. Prior to the first day of classes of the term, the student seeks to attend as a resident student. The student has maintained continuous residency status for 1 full year. All that means is, if you, let's use fall of 2024 again. If you can demonstrate a 12-month, 365-day period prior to the beginning of fall of 2024, we can accept that. If that started in June, that's great. If it started in May, that's great. Maybe you moved to Utah in May of 2023, and you're going to be living there till May of 2024, and then continue to live there June and July and August of 2024, because then you're starting school or you're going back to school in August of 2024. If we have 12 months before you moved here, that's fine. Now, we're not going to go back very far into the past because maybe you lived here 5 years ago for 12 months. We're not going to accept, 12 months from 5 years. It has to be reasonable within a close enough time period to the time you're applying for. But yeah, if you are submitting records and you want to say, I have records from June 2023 to the end of May 2024, we can look at that for sure.
Yeah, but if they're not in school, then they don't get the benefit of saying I'm in-person classes, the 20th of August through the 15th of December, so I don't have to show any documentation. They pretty much have to show documentation every week or check in with you every week that school is not in session. That includes winter break, that includes break between spring and summer, and break between summer and fall. Does not include fall break and spring break when they are still in classes, correct?
Correct. Yeah, if they're not enrolled in any school in the state of Utah, yes, we're going to need other types of documents. Purchase statement. They need to get a part-time job and collect all their pay stubs, something like that.
Okay, and so this is also looking in the rear view mirror a little bit, which is tricky. But if you already claimed them on your 2022 taxes, then you really, the 2023 taxes becomes critically important, even though they weren't in the state of Utah for half of that. You still need to not claim them in the 2023 taxes if you're looking to get residency in any part of 2024.
In most parts of 2024, I will say right now we're working with students who are applying for spring of 2024. The last day that we can accept documents is January 29th of 2024. If people are able to file their taxes before January 29th of 2024 and submit them to us before January 29th of 2024, that would be 2023's taxes. In the vast majority of cases, most people are not going to have their W-2s and everything ready to go well before January 29th. of the new year. So spring of 2024, in the vast majority of cases, it's going to be the 2022 tax year. That's going to be the most recently filed tax year for students. However, for summer of 2024 and fall of 2024, in those cases, it's really going to be, yeah, the taxes for 2023. So if your student is applying to become a resident in fall of 2024, we're going to want 2023's taxes. We're not going to really look at anything before that unless they fall under some kind of special circumstance. If they're living here for a year and they're proving that they're living here for a year and they have to prove that they were tax independent for the most recent tax year, that most recent tax year by fall of 2024 will be records from 2023.
Okay, awesome. Do you have, or can you let people know where your office is? Where, if they want their student to just go in and check in every week, where is your office?
Yeah. So let's do it two ways. Everyone take a screenshot, write it down, whatnot. This is the address of our office right here. We're on the second floor. We are under the bank of windows that say admissions, and there's another window. Well, there's a one window underneath that bank that says admissions that says residency. So if you go to the second floor of the student services building, go to the admissions windows and go to the residency window, that is where we're at. There you go. I have it saved as a map bookmark. Office of Admissions, Student Services Building. I'll then make it satellite image. This is where we are located in Salt Lake City. I don't know if this is helping people. Anyway. But yeah, if you go to Google Maps and type in Student Services Building, University of Utah, that's exactly where we're at.
Okay, awesome. And then I think it's also really important to note that not all dorms are closed over the holiday break. Some dorms are, but there's also options about guest house, things like that. So the housing department sent out emails through the registrar to students to let them know what the options are. If you didn't see those and you have questions about that, you can send an email to housing at info@housing.utah.edu to figure out what students need to do during the holiday break. So the 29 days, if you want your kids home for the holiday, then you just have to do the math on the 29 days and choose the time accordingly so that you don't go over that 29 days. Taylor, if a student has an internship that's approved by the University of Utah, but is not within the state of Utah, but they do get class credit for that, does that count as being in the state or not?
Yes. Highlighting here, University of Utah specific programs, which includes athletics, study abroad, institutional programs such as internships, can be counted towards physical presence. We see it all the time.
Not all internships though
do
you get class credit for. Some are good to do to get a job, but you don't get an actual class credit for that. Do those still?
If it's sponsored by the University of Utah, what we look for is if we're getting documentation on University of Utah letterhead from a verifiable staff member of the University of Utah with a signature, with dates, saying this student was sent by my program, by this program with the University of Utah to do XYZ activity, we would look at that.
Okay. Has your team done the math on if students attend fall, spring, and summer? Are the balance of the days, do they add up to 29 days or over 29 days or not?
Unfortunately, it is slightly over the limit for the most recent. So for the students, the numbers that are on the top of my head right now are students who are applying for fall of 2023. So students who are attending between August of 2022 and then they were applying in August of 2023 or before July of August 2023 to become residents for fall of 2023. Lots of those students had attended 3 semesters. The total number of days that were still left unaccounted for was 34. So yes, we were asking for 5 days or more of something else in addition to the transcripts. And I know
Okay.
it seems petty when we're saying we just need 5 days, and we apologize for that, but it is Utah state law. Um, yeah, we cannot have 29 days or more that are either unaccounted for or with records proven that the student left the state.
Okay, so would you recommend, just to make it simple for people, that if you do have a student that goes fall, spring, and summer semesters, that they just plan on either working out in the fitness center or swiping and hanging out if they don't like to work out, or using their meal plan or checking in with you during the weeks that they're not in school? Then that's like a very simple way
Buy
to say,
groceries at a local grocer or get a job and collect paychecks. Yeah, have records that show you were in the state, and then give us those records. Yep.
okay, and then if they move in on August 15th or 16th or 17th,
Yes.
and they want to, in the following fall, they want to pay in-state tuition,
Huh?
they really have till the add drop period, so the year will still work for them. So the tuition payment deadline, they can kind of work it out so that their fall semester, they can get in-state tuition if they applied on time and had the documentation submitted on time.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand some of the nuances behind that question.
It's the
Um,
year to year. So if I move in, and then a year from when I move in, if I do everything right on the 29 days, then I should be able to pay in-state tuition in the fall, even though there's like a 2-week time period in there that
yeah,
I've had to show the documentation
so
for. Is your processing time longer than that? Do I have to pay out-of-state tuition a whole nother semester because of processing time?
So there's a lot of hypotheticals, but I'm going to read between the lines, and I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say, let's say a student moves in August 16th, and then we want them to have the documentation and the application submitted by or before July 1st, which we recognize there's still, a few weeks gap between August to, July 1st. That's fine. Submit what you have. Continue to submit additional proof of physical presence in that time period in July and August of the following year. That is 100% okay. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit and let you in on a little secret on our insider processing. Um, when we process an application for every single semester that we process it for, we do not start the count on the day that they actually physically move to the state of Utah. We have an allowance, and this is allowed, and it's fine, where we have days that we call do not count. They're essentially freebie days. And if we get an application for fall, let's say we're getting the application for fall of 2024, we will count August 1st of 2023 to the first day of school. I believe it was August 21st of 2023. All of those days will be marked do not count. They are freebie days. We're not going to ask, did you move in on August 16th, and can you prove when you moved here? And we give freebie days, but only for that very first period before the time period when they start that count. Did that make any sense, what I just said?
Yeah, and I think it's just important to reiterate, filling out the application by the deadline doesn't stop the need to continue to demonstrate that you're in the state.
Exactly. We will require still additional documentation. Filling in the deadline or filling in the application and submitting it on time doesn't mean that in all cases all of the documentation needs to be prepared and submitted by that priority deadline. It means you submitted the application and all the documentation you had up to that point, and we are going to prioritize your application above late applications. You'll still need to submit a few more documents, especially like proof of physical presence documents. But the vast majority of the documents you will need to have already in hand. The domiciliary ties, the Utah driver's license, the voter registration, the vehicle registration. You'll need to have the proof of tax independence for the prior tax year. So you're going to have a lot of the majority of the documents already on hand, and you can submit those. And the few documents needing to prove physical presence between July 1st to sometime in the end of July or into August of that year, that's fine. Continue to submit those. We have means by which you can submit those. It's called the post-submission form. 100% fine, 100% normal. We do it every single time.
Okay, and you only have to do one, you don't have to do all. Like if you're doing your gym, or if you're checking in, or you've got your meal plan, you don't have to submit all three, you just only have to submit one of those three. Is
You
that
don't
right?
need duplicate records. If you have one record that proved your physical presence for a certain time, we only need that one record. However, we often get duplicate records. Sometimes people get a little nervous and they just submit everything. And yes, it gives us a lot of work to do. We'll look through all of your records. We will. Everything you send to us, we will look at. So if you send multiple records, duplicates or triplicates or whatnot, we'll look at it. But if you're confident, I mean, you went to the gym once a week, it shows on the record you went to the gym once a week, you submit it to us. We don't have to have more records than that. So
And it's really only once a week during school breaks.
exactly. Yeah, well, yeah, if they're enrolled in school and they're enrolled on campus and we're using those transcripts, yeah, we'll use that. We don't need gym records on top of that for those
Right.
times between the semesters.
Okay. And then can you talk a little bit about WUI? So the West, you did a little bit. Can I at any time decide that instead of taking WUI, I want to become a resident?
There's a lot of nuance behind that question. I would, first and foremost, I need to emphasize WUI specific questions about WUI details. Please go to the Office of Scholarships and Financial Aid. I do not manage WUI. I don't know very much about WUI. What I can tell you is if you want to be a resident, you have to spend 12 months and have proof that you were off of WUI or off of the others, like the International Student Exchange or the Utah Tech University Good Neighbor Program. You have to have proof that you were not using those funds at any point during the 12 months before you want to become a resident. You can't decide in the middle of a 12-month period, oh, I want to be a resident, and then apply if you've been using WUI. You have to, and we work with the financial aid office on every single application to get verification that they were not on WUI at any point during the 12-month period that they're detailing in their application.
Okay.
We're real strict about it.
Yeah, so that feels like if you've got any specific questions related to making a decision about changing from WUI to residency, it would be in their best interest to reach out to your office and kind of talk through that first.
Some of it, we
Would you
don't have
agree or not?
specific about WUI. We have
Okay.
information specific to residency. So if it's a question about how do I gain residency, come to our office. If it's a question about WUI, such as canceling WUI or when should I cancel WUI or how do I cancel WUI, please go to the Office of Scholarships and Financial Aid.
Okay, excellent. And then once residency is approved, do you have to reapprove it, or are you now just a Utah resident for the rest of the time you're at the University of Utah?
Yeah, I love to say it this way. I love to say once you're a resident, it's one and done. Once you're a resident, you stay a resident. And the only way you lose resident, it's literally a legal status with the state of Utah. It's a legal recognition that the state has. And once you gain residency for tuition purposes in the state of Utah, you will maintain that unless you do one of two things. You move away from the state of Utah for more than 11 months, or if you get a domiciliary tie out of state. So if you got a Utah driver's license, you went through the process, you became a Utah resident, and then you get an Arizona driver's license, you're no longer a Utah resident. But as long as you maintain those domiciliary ties, and as long as you continue to live here, you are a resident.
Okay. And then several questions about for students who live in the dorms, when they go to get their driver's license, the DMV asks for documentation. Any lessons or advice on how to do that?
I shy away from, and I tell my team to do this. I like to say we're going to keep it within our wheelhouse. We know residency, we're the experts on residency. What I will say is please go to the Utah Department of Public Safety. They are the ones who issue driver's licenses, and ask all of those specific questions to the Utah Department of Public Safety. They have a website. They have offices. I mean, you get the driver's license down by the Utah State Fairgrounds. For most students who live here on campus, at least, that would be the closest one. But I would recommend talking to them directly. They have different criteria about what kind of documentation is required to get a driver's license and whatnot. So I would direct all driver's license specific questions to the Utah Department of Public Safety.
Okay, great. And then the last question, because I know I've kept you a half hour longer almost than I promised I would. So last question.
It's not the longest presentation I've given, unfortunately.
You've ever given?
I've given
Okay.
longer ones with more questions, so
Okay,
bring it on.
awesome. Several questions about can students go home and work over a break if it's less than 29 days? It would show that they have a pay stub from another state. Does that mess up anything that they're doing? And then are there any certain events or purchases that don't count on their credit cards being inside the state? Like if there's not an address or something, like I don't know if Uber Eats
Oh, yeah.
demonstrates that I'm actually dropping something off in Utah, so there's not an address that it's a Utah location. So anything about that?
Yeah, two parts of the question. First part, 29 days. So let's do some math. 365 days minus 29 is 336 days. If you have records showing you were in the state of Utah for 336 days or more, 339, 340, you're fine. If you left the state of Utah for 2 weeks to go work somewhere, but that's it, and you have records to prove 336 days or more, you're totally covered. First part of the question. Second part of the question, there are certain purchases we absolutely can't use as proof of physical presence in the state of Utah. Uber Eats is a great one. DoorDash is a great one. Venmo transactions, we can't use any of those as proof that you're in the state of Utah. Anything that's digital, Amazon purchases. If you made a purchase on Amazon and bought a package that's being delivered to, even if it shows, which I don't think it would on a bank statement, but if it shows the physical address or the mailing address it's being delivered to, we can't use that. Anything that's digital online, we can't use as proof of purchase in the state of Utah. Purchases need to have some kind of demonstrated that they're in Utah. Usually it's like an address with a zip code and whatnot. I mean, I've seen at this point hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of purchases on bank records. But you know, if you're going to the local Smiths, if you're going to a Maverick, if you're going to a concert here in Utah, you're going to a boutique or a retail shop, you're making purchases here on campus, like you got a parking pass on campus or whatnot, or you went to the bookstore. All of those are going to show up on a bank record showing the purchase was made in Utah. It's going to show where it was made and it's going to show when it was made. We have to have things like that. But yeah, going back to the Uber Eats comment, yeah, you're right. It doesn't prove that you were there. It proves that food was delivered maybe to a certain address, but it doesn't prove anything beyond that.
Okay, gotcha. It probably would be smart too if your student is flying in and out, make a purchase at the airport before you get on the plane, and make a purchase at the airport as soon as you get off the plane, and those 2 days count for you being in the state.
You know what? If you submitted copies of plane tickets and it showed you came in or you left from Salt Lake City International, that counts you were in Salt Lake City that day.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. So that also counts. So I know there were a few questions that we didn't get answered. I mean, honestly, we had over 130 questions, and I did my best to get themes. So if you still have specific questions, then you can send them to residency@utah.edu. Or the phone number works there, or the address works there. And then I also want to make sure you know where to get a copy of this recording. So if you go on utah.edu website, there is a location, we call it Utah Fresh, which is just where we put together all the information for students and incoming students. And if you go into utahfresh.utah.edu, then you can go in and you can see the recording for this webinar and all the previous webinars we've done on other topics. And so there's lots and lots of information. I know it's really complicated, but we're balancing state laws, federal laws, university policy, Utah System of Higher Ed policy. So we do our best to simplify and be really clear in communicating. but you always can ask questions. So if you go to utahfresh.utah.edu, there's a little chat bot there that's actually answered by a real person. So if you type in your question there, they can also help you get to somebody that can answer the question you have. If it's a residency question, this is the fastest way to do it. But if you have a question about housing or internships and do the internships count, those kinds of things, a lot of time the colleges have to determine if the internship counts versus somebody just had a job somewhere and called it an internship. So it's always worth it to ask specific questions because you don't want to have to pay an extra semester of out-of-state tuition because there was an error or, it took a while to do something. So it's really smart to be on top of this. So I want to thank Taylor so much for spending so much time with us and having so much great detailed information. And I want to thank you all for participating in this webinar.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Thanks. Bye.